Hey y'all, and welcome back to a new video. Today we're going to be looking at a chess game I played recently, which ended up becoming like one of the highest percent accuracies I've played in months. I played this game at near perfect 97% accuracy with a 2700 estimated rating, and we're just going to get into the chess. So I start off the game with d4, my opponent goes knight to f6, and I decide to play the move bishop to g5. Bit of a strange line, bit of an unorthodox line. This is the Trompowsky attack. Of course, there are more common variations such as c4, g3, bishop f4, knight f3, a million different things. Bishop g5 is very, very strange, but the point and the reason I play this move is mostly to try and get my opponent outside of their comfort zone, because a lot of people don't know these lines too well, or at all, in that matter. In any case, my opponent decides to go with the most combative line, which is knight to e4, and I enjoy playing the move h4 here, which is the raptor variation, which is an incredibly aggressive variation and can lead into some very, very interesting areas. Speaking of which, one line that can be played here is knight takes g5, h takes g5, and black can try to play this move e5, but this is already bad, seeing as white immediately gets a ton of development. I had a friend who consistently played into this line and just got a worse position outside of the opening, because it's very natural to do this. It's very natural to play e5 and be like, okay, well, you put the pawn on g4, I'm going to take it, but white just is much, much better. In any case, my opponent decides not to take my bishop and plays the move h6, which is one of the best moves in the position. The other move is d5, which makes a lot of sense, but h6 is completely reasonable. Bishop f4 here is the only move. The other idea is to go back to d2, but that would be stupid. We're going to keep our bishop out. My opponent goes d5. I play the move knight to d2 pretty quickly, simply saying, okay, well, I want you to trade with me. I want to get my queen active. Then I'm going to go e3, knight here, knight c3, bishop to d3. I'm going to play it like a London style with my rook exposed, and I'm going to just be very comfortably better with all my development being much faster than my opponent's. My opponent decides to capture. Knight takes e2, which is completely reasonable. There's not many other options. The other option here is bishop to f5, which can be interesting. Like, there are some interesting lines here, but immediately I can go knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, and play a move like e3 with an idea of f3 and g4, and just take a ton of space over on the king's side. And my opponent, if they're unprepared for some attacks like this, can get into a serious problem with a borderline winning position for white out of the opening. Said, my opponent goes knight takes d2, queen takes d2, and bishop f5 now. Okay, very reasonable, developing piece. I play e3, opening up my bishop as well, because, well, the bishop needs to be exposed. I might trade here in some line. I'm not too sure. Also, by the way, during this game, I was not feeling the greatest. I just played a game where I just completely failed. I think I played like a terrible accuracy, and I wasn't feeling too smart. So I was a little bit unsure of myself, and you'll be able to see that a bit later in the game. My opponent decides to respond here with e6. Reasonable, developing the bishop as well. Maybe he plays c5, maybe he plays c6. I'm not too sure. It's really up to chance. And I decide, okay, well, I'm going to play the move knight to f3. Point is, my knight is coming here. This is where the knight wants to be in all lines, and I'm not too sure where this bishop is going to be yet, which is a good reason of why you should develop your knights before your bishops. So the bishop in this line can go onto many different squares. My bishop can eventually go to d3. My bishop can go to b5 to pin a knight in some lines. My bishop can go to e2. I'm not too sure where I want it just yet, and the knight is certainly going to go to f3 because I want to put it on the e5 square. My opponent goes knight d7. Which is pretty reasonable. Now if I go knight to e5, my opponent can even snap take this, and then this would just be a very boring and dry position, probably looking to be pretty equal, since of course we all have the same pawn structure. We have the same pawns everywhere, no one's traded any pawns, we have the same pieces. This is very equal. White is slightly better here because the queen is on a slightly better square, but in all honesty, this isn't the type of chess I want to play. I don't want it to be boring and even for my opponent. So instead, I took some time to think. And for some reason, I got a little bit worried about some interesting lines in this position, and there's a couple things I could have done. if I wanted to, I could have developed my bishop now. I could have developed my bishop now, because now I'm not going to play bishop to b5. Now bishop to b5 is a mistake. Of course, this would be a move previously, but now bishop to b5 is not good, because my opponent will always be able to play the move c6. c6 isn't even the best move here, because there's no threat. Like, my opponent can even do whatever, but c6 at the very least, whenever my opponent wants, and they'll just be fine. So I would have to put my bishop on d3 here, which would have been the best line. There's another idea of playing h5, trying to argue that my opponent will have some issues on the king side in the long run, a very engine-like idea, something that I play later in the game, but now it just didn't strike me as the right move. I just didn't really see what it accomplished at this point, so I decided not to go to that, and decided to play something a little bit more prophylactic. Of course, the other line that I was seriously looking at is the move c4, and the reason why I played the move I did in the game is because of this line. c4 to me is a very, very common idea in these d4 positions, because of course you gotta press at the center somehow. But c4 here, I didn't really think was that good, because at the same time, after a move like c4, my opponent will at the very least be able to take, and play like c5. At the very least, like c5 is bad because of d5. Sorry, not here. Play knight b6 and then play a move like c5. Right? Let's say I play bishop d3. At the very least, takes, and like c5. Right? Oh my god, I am just whatever. No, where c5 happens sometime. Bishop b4, king e2, c5? No. Okay, whatever. I don't care. Anyway, one of Black's major ideas is to play c5, and I was a little bit scared of that at some line here. And I was also slightly worried if my opponent just played a move like c6, that they would have some ideas to hit my queen over here, since I would not be able to play a move like c3. Maybe they could play something like a5, right? They have an idea of bishop to b4, and I was not too happy about this. I just didn't like the fact that my king was a little too exposed, so I decided that before I play the move c4, I'm going to instead take a step back, realize some of my opponent's ideas, and I play the move a3 after a decent bit of thought. Actually, not that much thought, 4 seconds. I thought for longer, but whatever. a3. The point is, I'm always guarding this square. It cannot be a bad move, and I'm doing completely fine. And the point is that if my opponent's going to try and get over here in the future with some queen a5, I'm always going to be ready with like c3 and b4 at the very least, and I should be doing well. And if I play c4 first, I will have b4 in most lines. In any case, my opponent here decides to play the move a5, which is pretty reasonable. He's trying to stop me from expanding on the queen side. Now, b4 is never an option. Of course, it never was beforehand, but now it's really not, because I can't recapture, since the rook would come down and I would be losing the game. Instead, now I go with my original idea, which was to play the move c4, strike at the center, and my opponent decides to take it. Okay, I recapture with the bishop. My opponent goes c6 now with some interesting ideas. There's an idea to go with the queen up to b6 in some lines. There's an idea to play b5, which seemed like the most aggressive line, seemed what he was trying to do. And the point is that he wants to play b4. See, like just a sample line, I don't know, h5. My opponent can play b5. I can play like bishop e2. This is all like very subjective. My opponent can play a move like b4. And I was a little bit worried about stuff like this, just coming down here. Of course, now it's bad, but in the future, in some like different areas, like this is okay, because of course I can't take since I lose my queen. And I don't know, it was just a little bit worrying. So I decided, okay, after this, I'm like, let's make it so my opponent can have a hard time. Is going to have a seriously hard time playing the move b5, and let's get a piece into the game. And I decided to make one of the few inaccurate moves that I have in this game. Very slight inaccuracy. I played the move rook to c1. I know it's such a huge inaccuracy, from plus 0.2 to minus 0.05. Oh no, so terrible. But yeah, this isn't the right move. It's fine. It really is. But I probably should have been a little bit more like forward. I should have played a move like bishop to d3, try to argue that this trade is good for me, and after something like bishop e7, I can like quickly go with this move long castles, which is the computer really likes. It's really hard to do, But the point is that I'm just arguing that this is not a weakness. Like this is a good idea because I can do stuff like this, which is weird, but yeah, possible. In any case, rook to c1, very common idea. The point is that b5 is a little bit weakening because now after b5 I would just be better. Bishop to d3, this pawn is super weak. Let's say bishop takes d3, bishop takes d3. You can never play c5 because this pawn will be hanging, and this pawn is immediately targeted. So my opponent have to play something like this. I don't even know. I can play king e2, for instance, which is a nice move, trying to argue that this rook is still powerful. And the move knight e5 is going to come into play very shortly. And my opponent is, as you can see, it's very difficult for my opponent to keep all their pawns together. Instead, rook to c1 played. My opponent goes knight to b6. He doesn't fall for the b5 trap. And I play bishop back to d3, which is the best move in the position. My engine here says it's the best move in the position at depth like 22. I don't care about the game review engine, whatever. It's the best move. Bishop to d3. I don't really know where else I would put my bishop, in all honesty. Maybe e2, I guess. a2 isn't the stupidest idea, but I don't know why I'd be trying to put my rook here. I don't know. In any case, bishop d3, bishop takes d3, queen d3. And now my opponent simply plays the move bishop to e7, going after my pawn. And now is the point where I actually make an inaccuracy. This move is actually not good. I really shouldn't have done this. I should have kind of realized that I'm the only one having fun here and I can start to get aggressive, which is something I enjoy doing. I like getting aggressive. But instead, I just played a super lazy move. I just decided that my queen was a little bit bad here, and I was worried about moves like c5 and e5 coming in since my queen is undefended. And I decided to move my queen out of the way to a different square. But the issue is queen b3 now is just not good. I don't have to do this right now. I can do this later. If he like provokes me with a move like c5, then I can play this move queen to b3, and I have like the entire right to. Of course, after c5 and some other position, I don't know, say g3, c5, I always have queen to b5 check, and I'm like winning, right? So this was really stupid since there's no threats, and yeah, very annoying that I played queen to b3. And I should have just realized there was no threat. I actually gone into it with a move like e4, which looks like it's destabilizing the center, but it's actually just taking control of this. And this pawn is not a weakness. This pawn is simply not a weakness. There's no way that he can really go after it. Like this move, I mean, I'm just better here. Like computer even says rook h3 and start an attack, right? Like this is pretty excellent position. Instead, queen b3 is on the board. Very disappointing that I played this move. Would have been a much better game if I had not played this move, but whatever. It's ended up still being a pretty decent one, and now I have some like decent ideas. Now the queen is a little bit the queen is a little bit weird here. Like for example, now I can move this knight, and you can't take this pawn because rook takes, queen takes, and I take the knight, and the queen would be overloaded in that case, and you have none of this because of king here defending the rook, and actually white would be winning in that position. Queen to b3. My opponent decides the castle, completely reasonable, and I think for a long period of time, and I think I came up with a pretty cool idea. I decide here that there's one thing in this position that's actually annoying me. Of course I could play knight e5. However, knight e5 in this position is a little bit different than knight e5 if I was able to play it with him not castling and him taking on b4. The difference is that knight e5 now, he can take. And after like rook takes here, my opponent has shoot. No, I totally misplayed. Oh my god. I was just worried about queen takes h4. I just thought this wasn't like as good now because queen h1 here, and like this isn't like the best position anymore. Like my opponent has these passers which are a little annoying. But I guess not. No. Just a4 and I lose. Okay, great. Yeah. Yay! I love chess. Anyway. Whatever. I thought that my pawn was a little bit weak and I didn't really enjoy the fact that my opponent had some pressure on it. So I decided if the pawn is a weakness now, the pawn is a weakness currently. It's a weak piece. He's gonna play a4. I knew he was gonna play this eventually. I didn't realize it was that powerful immediately. Maybe I'm stupid. Maybe whatever. Doesn't matter. I realized here that the pawn on h4 is a bit of a weakness, right? And if I wanted to kind of, what's the word? If I wanted to kind of like confirm that it like wasn't a bad move, like putting my pawn on h4. If I wanted to like not admit that the move h4 at the start of the game was bad, then I had to do something with this pawn. And the main idea is to play g4 at some point, but I didn't really like g4 immediately. I wasn't too sure about g4. I thought, okay, I go g4, my opponent can, like, I don't even know, play queen d5 or something, like, right, I destabilize my knight. You can take here if you want, but, like, this is already really bad for me. Sorry, not there, of course. Rook to g1 would be the move. And then like this, and like there's already issues. Like I'm already doing pretty badly. So I didn't really enjoy this idea of g4, and I of course don't want to trade queens. So I'm like, okay, how else can I use this pawn in a way that like makes it worth it that I put the pawn there? How else can I like use this pawn correctly? And the only way I could really think of to prove that it wasn't a weakness was that I had to play this move h5, which I think personally, I think this move is really good. I know the engine doesn't like it. The engine thinks it's minus 0.3, and it's actually like my worst move of the game. But I really like this move. I think it's really fun. It's an engine-esque move. I'm just trying to say that this pawn is not a liability. It's a very, very strong thing, kind of controlling the king. And I mean, Stockfish loves these positions. To me, like from like my experience, like watching T-set games and stuff, like Stockfish loves putting their pawns like super close to their opponent's king on like h5 and h6, just trying to restrict some space. And the pawn does actually work out in the end. Like this pawn comes in handy later, which is just incredible how that happens. I tried to run the engine for a long period of time to try and like convince myself this move was good. Fortunately, it was never more than minus 0.15, minus 0.15, which is disappointing, but whatever. It's not that bad. I really like this. I think it's a very interesting move. Any case, a4 now. I decide after a decent bit of thought to play the move queen c2 because I didn't really see the difference here. It's either like queen d3, queen c2, queen d1. Queen d3 and queen c2 are based on the same diagonal. I think queen c2 is a bit better than queen d3 because this kind of still goes into some ideas with the queen being hanging. And actually, queen d1 is probably the better move out of the two, of queen c2 and queen d1. Because queen d1, actually, the queen is pointed on a better diagonal here. I should have played this move. I don't know why it didn't. Yeah, this is just a better diagonal for attacking play in the future. And I think black has a lot of problems here. In case, queen c2 played, knight to d5. I put my bishop in the center with bishop to e5, trying to induce this move f6, which I thought would be a positional weakness, because now you're weakening this pawn, and I can always get back onto this diagonal. Also, this pawn is still a bit hanging, and I'm going to play e4 eventually, right? So I thought that bishop e5 was pretty strong. My opponent decides here to play queen to a5, which makes sense. He's giving me a check. He thinks he's getting a bit of pressure. He thinks he's getting his queen in the game. He maybe wants to play b5 at some point. I'm not too sure. But the move makes a decent bit of sense, like maybe queen b5, right? I decide after a decent bit of thought, there's really two moves to think of. I thought about king e2, but I didn't really like it. I thought this was just a bit much. I don't like my king being that exposed. Let's see what the engine thinks. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Like queen b5. I have to go back at the very least. I've lost the right to castle. I don't know. Maybe I want to castle eventually. Maybe not right now, but you know, it's a possibility. I play king e2 eventually. King f1 is a move the engine gives, but I don't understand that move. So really, it's between queen d2 and knight d2. And the reason I decided to end up going with queen d2, which is the right move. I'm happy with this move, queen d2. It is the best move. The engine doesn't really know what it's talking about. The engine here thinks that queen d2 is the best move. I don't know why, it's just excellent. In any case, queen d2. The point of this, okay, I have to block my king. And the reason why I decided not to block with the knight is that, yes, you might say, okay, well, the queen gets in the game here. Well, the queen gets in the game. There's an argument to be made to block with the knight. The reason why I didn't do this, I simply just didn't like the idea of going backwards. And I thought, okay, a queen trade isn't the most amazing thing from an aggressive standpoint, but from a positional standpoint, after the queen trade, which should happen, I could take back with the king or the knight. I actually did take back with the knight in the game. They're basically equal. But anyway, I can take back with the king or the knight, and now, like, my position's pretty pretty good without the queens. He has no idea, he has no ways of like threatening me, and I still have an attack here despite having the queens being traded off the board, because I can place things like rook cg1 and g4 g5 and really start hammering at my opponent's king. My opponent decides to trade. I'm not too sure about this move. I thought maybe he could just keep the tension, or maybe just move the queen away. Like, I don't know, it's like a random move to be played. I don't know, like rook c8 or something. Like, I thought this was an idea, like queen a5, queen a5. Now his rook is kind of in the game. He might play b5 at some point. I don't know. I just thought this was a little bit better. In any case, queen takes d2. I decided to take with the knight, because I decided that I wanted to eventually put my king on e2 instead of d2 to defend the f2 pawn. And I kind of like the idea of rerouting my knight up here, since I thought it was my worst placed piece. It's not really doing anything on the f3 square. These squares aren't really covered. The square is taken up by the bishop, which is doing a marvelous job there. And the d2 square can very easily reroute up here, maybe get on the queen side and some lines after the knight moves, after I play e4 and make the knight move. Or it can even come into this square, or it could even help with an attack by facilitating g4 g5 on the e4 square. Like, it can do a lot more on d2 than f3. My opponent now decides to bite the bullet and play the move f6. I think he decided to do this because now, after the queens are traded, I don't have a light squared aggressor, and this pawn is no longer a weakness, and he doesn't really have any issues on the diagonal. I decided to go all the way back to h2 because I didn't like the prospect of blocking my g pawn on the g3 square, and of course f4 would just be bad. Like f4 is just bad. We double the pawns, we isolate this one. Little beginner lesson: doubled pawns are bad, isolated pawns are bad. Black is just much better, because these pawns are going to be picked off in the endgame. Bishop h2. My opponent decides to go with f5 now, which is kind of aggressive, and it didn't really seem like the right move, since he immediately gives me back control of the e5 square, which I kind of liked. And I can even put the bishop back on e5. Like, this is the best move, actually. I can even put the bishop back on e5 and just be, like, completely winning. But I decided not to do that. I decided to be a little bit more cautious, and I played the move knight to f3 first, which is completely fine, despite what the engine thinks here. Thinks knight c4 is slightly better. I think they're the same move. But in any case, it doesn't matter. Knight f3. My opponent goes bishop to f6, which makes sense. Trying to trade off my bishop if I come to this square. Because I think the bishop is a little bit more powerful than the knight coming to that square. Of course, the knight is the most logical piece to come to that square, because knights like to belong on outposts. But the bishop pressure onto the king would be really strong there. So I decided, okay, I'm not going to put the bishop on that square. I'm instead just going to put the knight on this square and say, okay, if you want to trade for the knight, you can totally trade for the knight. I'm totally happy if you trade for the knight, because my bishop is a lot more powerful than this knight. It pressures the king. I think that I'm doing quite well here, and at the end of the day, at the very least, I will be having an endgame that is bishop versus knight. So I thought this was very good, although bishop takes e5 is the top engine move, and it is actually very slightly better for black here, which is kind of insane. Minus 0.1, yes, but better. And my opponent goes for it. Bishop takes e5. Okay, I have to take back with the bishop. Otherwise, my bishop will be locked away on h2 for a long time. My opponent goes rook f to c8, a move that I think I understand. I think he's still trying to play b5, But I realize here that this is a very big inaccuracy because it allows white to start a massive attack. And now I play like the best couple of moves I play all game. Also, that's my dog in the background if you can hear her. I play this move because I think, okay, I have a limited amount of time. I have to go very quickly. What's the most aggressive move? What's the way to start an attack? The fastest. I play the move G4. And this is very cool because, of course, at the baseline, I'm losing a pawn. But if he takes this, I'm simply going to play rook g1. I'm going to win the pawn back. There's no way for him to defend the pawn. Knight to f6 just opens it up. I'm going to be able to get this outpost and hit both of his pawns here. And if he allows me to take him, I get the open g file. He still has problems, and I'm just going to be a lot better. I am going to pause the recording to check on my dog. All right, I'm back. Yeah, okay, g4. So here, if you're going to hit with g4, you're already going to be into a bit of a shock because g4 is hyper aggressive, and if I was playing black here, I would already be like a little bit concerned that I was almost lost in this position. But if we're being logical here, at the end of the day, black has ways out. Like black can play king f7, knight f6. There's ways to survive, but I would argue that black is already positionally slightly worse in this position. My opponent thinks for a little bit, decides to take on g4, which makes sense because what else are you going to do? Are you going to allow me to take? Are you going to play some like king f7, allow this, and rook g1, and just like, look at this. Like already I'm doing quite well. And here is where the pawn on h5 really shines because black would love to play g6 or g5. But with this pawn here, black can't do that, which is kind of nice. F takes g4. I play rook to g1, which makes sense. Also rook to h4. It's basically the same move, but whatever. Rook g1. My opponent goes rook back to f8, understanding that I am about to launch a very, very strong attack, and he probably needs to bring all his pieces back over to that side of the board. I take the pawn on g4 now. My opponent goes rook to f7, and I simply play the move king to e2, and it's already very, very dangerous. Now I'm going to simply play the move rook cg1. I'm going to put more pressure. I'm going to go here. I'm going to hit both these pawns, and I'm just going to get a very, very strong attack and probably win the game. My opponent plays move rook to d8, and he loses the game. Now I just need a couple more accurate moves, and it's game over. He cannot do this. He cannot do this. He has to understand the danger of this position right now as it is. He has to do something like kind of crazy. He has to play like king to h7 here. I'd play my rook over back to cg1. Now he's gonna play knight to f6, and I don't know. It's gonna be interesting here. It's a game. It's a game. Now my opponent has like some play. These pawns aren't the weakest. This pawn is slightly weak, but it's also okay, and it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll probably even out, and probably I will be able to do something here. But in all honesty, this is an equal endgame. But with rook to d8, his idea is clear. He wants to defend against this. But this doesn't work at all because rook cg1. I'm threatening the pawn. You have to play rook dd7, otherwise you will lose the game. He plays rook dd7, and now it's very simple. It's just a fork. Rook g6. And the game is over. Why is it over? Both pawns are hanging. This one is very clearly hanging. It has no defenders, and it's hard to defend, by the way. Like you have to do like some weird stuff with, you have to like be very passive with your rook. And the other issue is that this pawn is also hanging because of the pin from the other rook down here, and there's no tactics to save it. No tactics to save it. You have to sack one of the two pawns. Black has to play king to h7. I would take on e6. The game would go on, but I would be winning this position. But instead, after rook g6, my opponent plays rook d to e7. I take the pawn on h6. And now it's actually even worse. And the pawn on h5 comes into play again here, because now the idea is very simple. I'm going to play here, and I'm going to play h6. There's nothing he can do. If he tries to run his king, this is checkmate, which is kind of nice. That would be a fun way to end the game. And I don't see a move. I have no idea what my opponent could possibly play here that would not just lose on the spot. But he tries. He goes a rook to f5. Makes sense. He's going after my pawn. I simply play rook h to g6. Takes on h5. And it's easy. Take. Up 2 pawns. He's almost able to do something here. He tries to do something. Rook to h1 is a nice try. Trying to come after this pawn. Having some like ideas here. It can get scary for white. But unfortunately, my opponent misses that he is going to be losing. Because this knight has no moves. No moves. Boop, 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 boop. No squares open for the knight. And e4 traps the knight in the center of the board. You might say, no, it doesn't trap the knight. He gets knight back. You play bishop d6, and then he goes rook to h7. But this is simply a losing endgame because here, I don't even have to take and play king d3. But here, and here, I'm up 2 pawns in a king endgame. I'm going to win this every day of the week. And yeah, this is how the game ended. And I ended up looking at this game in the review section. I played this game at 97% accuracy with like a near perfect game, except for like 1 or 2 inaccuracies. I think that the biggest one was this move knight to f3. In all honesty, I don't even understand the difference. We can go over it a little bit. F4, I can play e4, I thought. Knight f6, I play knight d2. I guess I just knight h5, right? So maybe not that. I guess I don't play e4, I go king e2. Let's say it takes. And actually, rook a5 is the big plan. And that's why I had to play knight c4 here. Okay. This is why knight c4 is best. And the point is now f4 is not correct because actually e4 is good here. E4, knight f6, isn't this just the same thing? I guess bishop takes f4 now. And yeah, I'm just a lot better. I can't really understand this. Bishop e3. Well, okay, let's say I don't play e4. Let's say I play king e2. Takes. This is just a very decent position because my opponent's unable to play the move rook to a5, which would allow them to snipe this pawn from the other side of the board. And after a move like bishop to g5, I could simply play anything. I can play bishop d6 because the knight is always defending the e3 pawn, which is complicated. I didn't understand that. In any case, whatever. Near perfect game. Knight f3 was really the only huge mistake. And besides that, I'm very, very proud of myself. Also, by the way, I'm up to 2265. Only 8 points away from my highest rating, and hopefully I will be able to do something with that shortly. Either way, that's all we got for you today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys found it entertaining, instructive, all of the above. If you did, remember to like, subscribe, don't let them YouTubers tell you to do. And yeah, that's it. Good evening and good night.